Painkiller Ghosts, Chapter 3, An Erratic History of Thyme, Part 2. The first time he got too close to a fire was the time that Maria's father shot him. The first time that Thyme was shot, he was still Timothy, and he was shot by Maria's father with a .38 handgun in the left shoulder. Maria's father meant to shoot someone else. Timothy was not the target. The target was someone who was wrestling with him, with a knife near his throat, near flames hidden by thick smoke. The entire night was a confusing one, especially for aiming a gun. They were visiting her father at his house in Mobile in early 2001, before those big hurricanes hit, and she had been looking forward to seeing him. They had been there for one night, 1.5 days really. They were down for a week, and it had driven down in her car. Maria's father still worked as a policeman in the city, and he figured he'd do it for a few more years. While her father was at work, Maria and Timothy were at a park, reading, kissing, and smoking a joint. Later, back at her father's house, Maria sat down on the couch to watch the news. Bush was in his first few months in office. The world was calm. The weather was calm. The celebrity rehabs were full. He went outside to light the charcoal in the grill. He came in and took a shower while the grill warmed up. She fell asleep on the sofa. Her father came home and he quickly called up his sister up in Oxford. Thyme had finished his shower. Maria's father went up to shower. Timothy opened a beer and went to the grill to prepare dinner. He had his beer and a paperback book. Through the open bathroom window, he could hear her dad singing in the shower, the radio tuned to the oldies channel. He found himself laughing aloud while he tried to read to the off-key singing and found himself repeating paragraphs. Timothy grilled. Maria's father sang and showered. Then there was a great crash from inside, a shatter, collapsing glass, and crackling noise and a scream. He dropped his book, bounced towards the door, and didn't realize he had knocked over the grill with his paperback book lying under some red burning charcoal, the split plastic container with lighter fluid leaking out into the door jamb. He pounced through the door, ran into the living room where Maria was catnapping peacefully 5 minutes before. There was a man on top of her. They were wrestling, falling off the sofa, shattering a glass table. The man had a handful of Maria's hair and a knife near her breasts, a little blood seeping through her shirt. He cut some of her hair with the knife and tried to stuff it into her mouth. Timothy ran over and kicked the man in the side of the ribs, then rammed his left knee into the nearest cheek. A tooth was spit out. Maria was coughing, bleeding, trying to crawl away, gagging. By the time Maria's father turned off the shower, the first thing he smelled was the smoke. Naked, he ran to grab a fire extinguisher, and that's when he saw Maria crawling on her elbows and knees away from a man who was fighting Timothy. He ran to the coat closet for his gun. By the time he reached the living room again, the carpet was on fire. A man had Timothy on the ground, pinned in an awkward half Nelson with a knife to his neck. Maria's father yelled for the man to back off. Drop the damn knife. He was coughing, the gun was not steady, and there was smoke in the air. Timothy was on the ground and the man began to cut him. The knife was slicing into his throat. Maria's father aimed the gun at the stranger's head, which was the best shot he had. Instead, the bullet sank into Timothy's shoulder, who yelled out in pain. The man dropped Timothy, thrown off by the shot. The gun fired again. The knife was heading towards Maria, the man leaping for her. The drapes on the windows were on fire. Her father fired a third shot, hitting the man in the lower part of the spine, who fell towards Maria while screaming profanities. Timothy was in shock and pain. The man shoved Maria towards a burning window drape and ran with the knife towards her father's chest. Next door, the neighbors were calling 911. Her father fired again, twice in a row, putting a bullet into the Adam's apple and then kneeing the man down to the floor. But the man, with a frantic burst, put the knife into Maria's father's stomach. The flames got larger. Sirens were getting closer. A fire truck, too. Maria heard the sirens down the street, but she shut her eyes for a second. Maria awoke in the hospital, unharmed more or less, save a few bruises, burns, and a stitch or 10. Her father's house had burnt down, and her father had died from an infection from the stab wound and smoke inhalation. The intruder had died right alongside her father, not 10 feet from where her hair lay on the carpet, burning. Chapter 4. Why her brown eyes were blue. Timothy awoke in the hospital. It was in Mobile at the hospital that Timothy first discovered morphine. He spent 5 days on it in the hospital. At home, Maria went back to work, but Timothy's arm was still healing and he couldn't go back to work as a carpenter. He tried 2 pain pills at first, then a little more than recommended, and he tried to sleep through the day waiting for Maria to get home. She made him feel better. Only her, really. And pills. He told himself that he wasn't using the drugs to get high. He had pain, but they did get him high. Confused at first, mellow later, starting in the stomach, a deep warm feeling. It starts there and spreads to his legs, which then start to itch. Especially the left one. The left one itches first. Maria would take some of his pills. "I'm in pain too," she'd counter. She blamed herself for her father's death. He was trying to protect her, to save her and to save Timothy. She had never asked him for anything, but then never really had given him anything either. She blamed herself for Timothy getting hooked. She told herself that if he hadn't gotten shot, he wouldn't have started on the morphine. If he hadn't had to take time off from work, he wouldn't have been walking all over the city looking for hookups. The wound never got back to how it should have been, and he never worked in carpentry again. He had jobs sometimes after that, here and there, after he was shot, but a lot of times he didn't have one. Sometimes he'd sell some weed here or there, or paint a house here or there. Maria's father had tried to save his daughter's life and Timothy's life, and he did, and never knew it. The first time this bearded, skinny skeleton was shot, it was by Maria's father, and while the wound would heal eventually, the scar will always be there. The taste of pain pills never leaves the memory, the back of the tongue, where it is a tattooed taste. Time can never change that. But this is really why her brown eyes had the blues. Sometimes in the night, when Timothy was asleep next to her, she'd wake up and get sick. He'd be resting, sweating, right next to her in boxers and a white t-shirt. She'd wake up, stroke his beard, snag a hair now and then in her nail, and he'd stir his head but not wake up. High, very high. She was chewing codeine while having sex, shooting up when she should have been having breakfast. She was pregnant for a little while. Then the dog died too. She never wanted to be pregnant. She lost her child before he ever knew of it. She thought it was a little girl. She could never stop thinking that it was a girl in there. She would wake in the night, see him sleeping there, stroke his beard, get up and go vomit in the toilet. The 2 bulbs burning were her only confidant. She'd get up, brush her teeth, and then walk in sock feet down the hall back into the bedroom, open the drawer where they kept the stash, and go back into the bedroom. And she, Maria, got depressed. Felt like she had turned black on the inside, and her brown eyes had the blues, and her hands had the shakes, and she was sick. And when the dog died, she didn't know if Timothy was going to be okay. She worried about him. The dog died, and then all he did for days, a week, was stare at the wall with glazed eyes, and he looked like he had suddenly gotten the flu. He knew he was stuck in some kind of sadness, but couldn't get himself out for a while, and the whole time Maria was dealing with her own inner death feeling. And he didn't even know anything about it, and wondered why she was acting so distant to him at a time where it was so obvious that he needed her. And now it's now, and this is how it is. Time is in bed. He fell asleep quickly, thanks to a longer than usual walk, and he quickly falls into dreams. He dreamed he was awake in his backyard, or some backyard at least, and he was dreaming of a backyard that was near a lake, although he never lived near a lake. And he had some friends over, although he never really had friends for years. And the sun was going down, and it was autumn, and the sky was orange, a bright, burning orange, and he's throwing a tennis ball to his dog, the one he misses so much, but who is alive now in this bright orange dream. And he's alive, the dog, and now he, Time, feels alive, and he's throwing the ball for his dog, who's wagging his tail, and Timothy, not yet Thyme, is laughing and throwing the ball, and Timothy's friends are there singing, passing joints around, and there's Maria with her beautiful eyes, and she's smiling at him, calling out to the dog, their dog, and laughing, smoke clouding her face. And then someone panics, a few people, and Maria too, because above them, in the orange and pink sky, a plane, on its way to the airport not too far away, has started to shake and slow down in the air, and everyone at Timothy's party started to look up at the sky, to point, to stop laughing and to singing. And Timothy heard someone say, "Hey, that plane's gonna crash." And it was silent, and the engine sound in the sky died, and it was silent, so silent. The dog stopped chasing the ball and sat on the ground, the cold, hard ground, and then laid down and stared at the sky, at the plane falling. But then the most beautiful thing happened. They heard it, the crowd did, the party did. They heard that engine sound start up again, and they looked in the air, and the plane started to fly again, to gain altitude again, and started to head back up into the air instead of plunging with a crash into the ground. And everyone cheered. The dog smiled and started chasing the tennis ball again, and the plane flew out of sight, and there was silence. And so the party started again, and the joints were passed around again, and the dog was barking and playing again, and Maria was blowing into Thyme's ear again, Timothy's ear, of course. And then the sound of another plane came over the water, over the lake that was behind the Dreamland house. And the crowd began to cheer. The party began to cheer. The dog dropped its ball and sat next to Timothy and wagged his tail and barked while the people cheered and held their cups up into the air. And Maria was blowing kisses at the plane, and people were smiling. And then all of a sudden, this plane, the second plane, burst into flames and then dropped down as a fireball into the lake in front of the party. Timothy's party, and flames fell from the sky. And then when the plane hit the lake, the ground shook and kept on shaking, even long after the plane had fallen and floated as burning wreckage on the lake. The earth kept on shaking, and everyone in Timothy's party was shouting and burning. And that's when Thyme woke up. And the next day, he watched the news all day long, just to see if he had dreamed the crash. And the next day, when he was out walking and heard a plane pass over in the sky, he felt ill at ease and watched the plane until it was out of sight and not a burning wreck falling on him.